Grazie Sandy. Devo dire all'inizio mi dispiace di non parlare in italiano. Ero studente all'Università di Bologna 20 anni fa, ma ho dimenticato troppo in questi 20 anni e se sbaglio non voglio fare uno scandalo per il mio governo, quindi parlo in inglese. Allora, if we could get the slides up. Dove sono? Ecco. All right. I wanted to speak very briefly and share the number one most important thing that I've learned in the last 3 years working for Hillary Clinton. And that number one thing, see if I can get this to work. Can we advance the slide one? Ecco. Is that there is a massive shift in geopolitical power taking place around the world right now. Now, most people who think in terms of shift in power, in shifts of geopolitical power, think about it on a geographic basis, from the United States and Europe to Asia, or from the global north to the global south. I don't know whether that's true or not. But what I do know is that there is a massive shift in geopolitical power taking place in all 195 countries on planet Earth today. And that is from hierarchies, big media companies, government, and other large hierarchies. And its power is being devolved to citizens and networks of citizens. And this transfer of power is being facilitated by the internet. I don't mean this is a total transfer of power. I don't mean that government doesn't have power anymore, that large media companies don't have power anymore, that major hierarchies don't have power anymore. But what I would say is, having sat across the hall from Hillary Clinton for the last 3 years, one thing that I'm able to see is that citizens have capabilities that 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, would have required the backing of a very large hierarchy or hierarchies. And I think that that's relevant in the context of the forum over the next 2 days in one very specific and one very important way, which is fostering internet-fueled innovation. Let's see if we can advance this one more slide. 12 years ago, so in the year 2000, it cost €100,000 per month to run a basic internet application on the internet. So basically, if you wanted to start a .com, you had to have a Series A round of venture capital. You had to have, close to €2 million a year in fixed capital expenses before you actually put anything on the internet. Today, just 12 years later, advance one more slide. That same application that cost €100,000 per month costs €1,000 a month through the cloud. So whereas before you had fixed capital costs of over €1 million a year, today you can get it out of a checking account. Today it's something you can almost pull out of your ATM. Now, as a practical matter, what this means is that the barrier to entrepreneurship on the web is lower than it's ever been before. And it means that the ability to start a company requires only the breakthrough innovation of a little bit of code. We saw this most recently, for example, with Instagram. Instagram as a company is less than 2 years old. It had 13 employees. 13 employees when it was sold for $1 billion. 13 employees and it was sold for $1 billion. As I travel around the United States right now, what I increasingly see are these young people. I'm 40 years old, so that means everybody under 40 is young to me now. I see these young people, they're starting businesses based on scraps of code out of their dorm rooms, out of the back of their mind, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But what's significant is that the barrier to internet-enabled entrepreneurship is lower than it's ever been before. And here's what I think this means for the future of American and Europe's economies. If we could advance one more slide. 40% of America's GDP, 40% of our GDP, $6 trillion of annual economic activity comes from companies that did not exist in 1980. 40% of our GDP comes from companies that did not exist in 1980. If the United States is going to continue to be a great global leader, if Europe is going to continue to be a great global leader, advance the slide one, then in 20 years, can we advance the slide one? There will be a whole screen full of logos of companies that will fill this up that don't exist today. In order for Italy to lead, in order for the United States to lead, we have to be able to fill up these screens with companies that exist today in your heads and in the heads and hearts of young people. And this is a great opportunity, but it's also a great challenge. And so I think that one of the things to tease out over the next 2 days in conversation here is to think about what are those things that will unleash innovation, that will fill up this blank wall with logos that will create the economy of Italy in the 21st century. I have a really interesting job, and I'm doing it at a really interesting time. As Hillary Clinton's senior advisor for innovation, I basically sit at the crossroad of two communities. On the one hand, having turned 40 years old, in my world, that means you basically are a new adult. Oh, you're 40 years old, you can sit at the grown-ups table, the people with a little bit of gray hair who make the decisions in foreign policy and in this world. On the other hand, I serve as our liaison to Silicon Valley and to America's innovators and entrepreneurs. And what's interesting to me is to see that in one community, I'm the youngest person, and in another community, increasingly, I'm the oldest person. And I think that as we think about our respective futures, as we think about America's economic future, as we think about Italy's economic future, what we need to do is increasingly bring those two communities together. I say this as somebody from government. So this isn't the case of somebody preaching at government. I say this from my perspective inside government, working for Hillary Clinton, that we in government need to do a better job of recognizing the source of innovation and figuring out what we can do to nourish it and to unleash it. And I think one of the first steps in all of this is for us, frankly, to listen and learn. To listen to people like yourselves who are developing these businesses and who are propelling the industries of the future. I think it's important for us to remember that we only have one mouth, but two ears, and that public policy should be intelligently informed by the perspectives of entrepreneurs like yourselves. If we could advance the last slide. So in closing, it's a terrific honor to be here with you today. And I just want to close with a final observation. As we think about how tough our economies are right now, as we think about an almost Darwinistic world, I think that the smart thing for us as policymakers to do is modernize our approach to Darwin and recognize that it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but that most adaptable to change. Grazie molto.